They didn't just try to erase her name. They built a system to make sure no one like her ever stood up again. When a black law professor is violently arrested mid-lecture, the city believes the story the officers feed them, until one video flips everything upside down. As courtroom lies begin to unravel, secrets buried deep inside the justice system crawl into the light. But who really holds the power when the person you tried to silence turns out to be the one writing the rules? Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. And don't scroll away, because tomorrow's story might be even more explosive than this one. Lauren Bramly didn't blink when the first pair of hands yanked her from the podium. She was mid-sentence, her lecture half-written across the whiteboard behind her, an outline on federal power and systemic accountability. 60 wide-eyed students watched her body twist as Officer Trent Dawes slammed her wrists behind her back. Her voice had just been floating, calm, patient, learned, and then silence broke into chaos. The first gasp came from the front row. A chair scraped against the floor. Then another gasp, louder this time, followed by a shout from the back. "Yout, what are you doing?" Lauren didn't resist. She stood, spine straight, and let the cuffs bite into her skin. Her expression stayed flat, her mouth unmoving, her eyes locked ahead. Not on the officers, not on the students, but on something no one else in that room could see. Dawes was a thick man, shaved head, proud jaw, hands that gripped like they were used to owning wrists. He had that laugh, low, throaty, the kind of laugh people use to warn you they think they've already won. Behind him trailed Officer Mike Renner, younger, hungrier, eyes bouncing between Lauren's dignified posture and the dozens of phones now raised, blinking red, recording. "He's under arrest," Dawes barked, loud and unapologetic, as if that explained anything. "Step back. Keep filming if you want, but stay back." The lecture hall had gone still. No one moved. Not even the TA by the AV cart, whose hand hovered just above the emergency button on the wall. Lauren turned her head slightly, only slightly, toward the nearest student. A black girl, probably 20, with her hand shaking so badly her phone was wobbling. "Keep recording," Lauren said softly, her voice clear despite the restraint. "Don't stop." Renner stepped in and twisted her arm harder. "Keep your mouth shut," he hissed. "Not your stage anymore, lady." Lauren winced, just barely, not enough to satisfy him. The walk down the aisle of the lecture hall was long. Dawes pulled her like a prize. Each step echoed across the cement floors, and every eye followed her. The phones didn't lower. If anything, more came out. Students leaned into the aisles. Someone cried. Someone else whispered, "She didn't do anything." Dawes didn't hear, or he didn't care. Outside, the cruiser waited, engine running, lights off. The crowd that had gathered, students who'd seen the chaos through the windows, faculty lured by the noise, parted like water. Lauren was pushed into the back seat, knees hitting the doorframe. The metal burned against her skin. Renner chuckled as he closed the door. "One more for the record books?" Inside the car, Dawes adjusted the rearview mirror so he could look at her directly. Lauren met his eyes in the glass. He smirked. "You know what's funny?" he asked, shifting into drive. "People like you never see it coming. You think the world works for you. Your little titles, your lectures, your credentials. But out here, you're just another name in a file." Lauren said nothing. He tapped the steering wheel, humming a little under his breath. "You were holding." "I wasn't," she said evenly. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a sealed plastic bag. White powder. Held it up between his fingers like a magician revealing the final trick. "This right here, found it right in your briefcase," he said. "You planted that," Lauren replied, not angry, not shocked, just stating the fact, the way she might correct a date in a textbook. Renner laughed again. "That's cute. Like you're in a courtroom already." Dawes chuckled too. "She's gonna learn fast. These people always do, cameras or not." Lauren watched the city speed by. She knew these streets, not because she'd driven them, but because she'd investigated them. The precinct was only 10 minutes away. 10 minutes of smug silence, sharp turns, and eyes that kept checking the rearview mirror like they were waiting for something to go wrong. She felt the weight of the cuffs digging into her bones. They weren't tight because she struggled. They were tight because Dawes made them that way. As the car pulled into the precinct lot, Renner swung out first. "Hope you remembered this lesson," he said as he opened her door. "Smart people fall harder." Lauren stepped out, slowly. She didn't stumble, not even when he jerked her shoulder, not even when Dawes muttered something about mouthy professors. She looked straight ahead and walked forward. The desk sergeant looked up as they entered. "Charges?" he asked without looking away from the monitor. "Possession with intent," Dawes replied quickly. "Found it in her bag. Guest speaker at Eastwick University." The sergeant raised a brow, then finally looked at Lauren. "Guest speaker?" he repeated. Lauren said nothing. Her face remained unreadable. "No ID on her," Renner added with a smug grin, "but I'm sure she'll be in the system soon." The sergeant shrugged. "Name?" Lauren tilted her head. "You didn't check my ID," she said to him. The sergeant squinted. "You telling me you're in the system or not?" "I'm telling you to look harder," Lauren said softly. Dawes rolled his eyes. "Don't bother. She's just trying to buy time. These types always—" "Enough," the sergeant snapped. He turned to the monitor and began typing. Lauren said nothing more. She let them process her mugshot, fingerprints, the standard dance. Dawes kept grinning like he was at a bar with old friends. Renner leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching like he was waiting for something funny to happen. At one point, she slipped her hand out, like it was waiting for something funny to happen. But nothing funny did. Lauren's mugshot was taken. She didn't smile, didn't flinch, just stared into the lens. Behind the camera, the young tech doing intake blinked twice. He looked at the screen, then at her, then back again. Dawes leaned in. "What? Never seen a professor booked before?" The tech swallowed hard. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Everything okay?" the sergeant asked. The kid didn't answer. He just hit enter and waited. And then the screen flickered. Something changed. But no one said anything yet. They thought they had her. They thought this was just another arrest, another story to bury beneath a headline, another name they'd rub out before the week ended. But Lauren Bramly wasn't here to play by their rules. She was here to see who else would hang themselves before the truth came out. And they were already starting to sweat. Trent Dawes popped the last bite of his sandwich into his mouth, brushed the crumbs off his shirt, and leaned back in the metal chair like a king on his throne. The squad room buzzed with voices, ringing phones, and the occasional burst of laughter from the other side of the bullpen, but Dawes wasn't paying attention to any of that. His focus was on the monitor in front of him, where Lauren Bramly's booking photo had finally uploaded into the precinct's system. "You see this?" he called out to Mike Renner, who was rifling through a vending machine on the far wall. "That's the face of someone who thought she was better than us." Renner turned, soda in hand, and let the can drop into the slot with a thunk. She didn't even blink, man, the whole time. Like she thought the ground wasn't even allowed to touch her. Dawes chuckled. "Oh, it touched her all right. You saw how she hit the back seat when I cuffed her. Hard. That woman's gonna learn real quick what happens when you mouth off in this town." Renner cracked open the can and leaned against the edge of the desk. "You think she's actually someone, though? She acted like she had people watching." "Please," Dawes scoffed. "Every professor with a podium thinks they're someone. They act smart, talk big, wear their little blazers and glasses like they're running the world. But take that away, strip it down to metal bars and cement floors, and they all break the same." Renner looked back at the monitor. Lauren's eyes stared straight ahead in the mugshot. No smile, no fear, just Stillness. He's not like the others, he muttered. He's nothing, Dawes snapped, louder than he meant to. A couple of other officers looked up. He waved them off, lowering his voice. She got caught. She's in the system. What matters now is what sticks. They both turned as the door opened and Sergeant Graves stepped in, clipboard in hand. He didn't acknowledge either of them as he moved past, but his eyes flicked toward the screen on Dawes' desk. Just a second. Long enough to recognize the image. "You got that university lady processed?" he asked without stopping. "Yeah," Dawes said, chest puffing a little. "Possession, intent to distribute. Took her in clean." Graves didn't smile. "At the bag of coke you logged under evidence. Sealed and tagged." Graves stopped now, turned. "You logged it under your ID?" "Of course." "You're sure?" Dawes' jaw tensed. "What are you getting at?" Graves didn't answer. He stared at them for a beat too long, then walked out the other side of the bullpen. The sound of the door closing behind him echoed just enough to leave silence in its wake. Rena spoke first. "He's acting weird." "He's always weird," Dawes muttered. "But maybe we should run her name again, just to make sure nothing's hiding." Rena was already back at the terminal. He typed in Lauren's name, eyes flicking through the records. "Same thing," he said after a moment. "Public university profile. Law professor. Speaks at conferences, a couple of op-eds. She's nobody." Dawes rubbed the back of his neck. Something itched there. Something he couldn't reach. "You know," Renner added, sipping his soda, "it's kind of funny." She never said the words. "You know, the ones they all say. I didn't do anything. I know my rights. Call my lawyer." She didn't even argue. Dawes thought about that. She didn't beg. She didn't plead. She didn't shout. She just stood there. "She was waiting," Ranner said quietly. "For something." "He was bluffing," Dawes said, standing up. "And we already called it." In the evidence room, Dawes double-checked the tag on the plastic bag. Still there. Still sealed. White powder still pressed against the edge like snow under glass. He stared at it for a moment longer than necessary, and then left. Downstairs, in holding, Lauren sat on a steel bench, hands folded neatly in her lap. No phone, no watch, no belt. The fluorescent lights hummed above her. Officer Marquez sat behind the glass divider, flipping through intake logs, stealing occasional glances in her direction. "Professor," he called, not quite mockingly. Lauren didn't answer. "You're awfully quiet for someone in your position." Still nothing. Most folks scream by now, demand their phone call, cry a little. "You're kind of messing with the rhythm down here." She lifted her eyes, finally, and met his gaze. "I don't have to do anything," she said calmly. "You will?" Marquez blinked, then laughed. It was short, nervous. "You'll see," she added, voice so flat it could have been mistaken for boredom. Upstairs again, Dawes and Brenner stood by the coffee machine, chatting with two other officers. The news was already spreading. Professor arrested at Eastwick. Coke found in her briefcase. Faculty losing their minds. One of the officers had a cousin in the local station who was pitching it to a news blog. "Maybe Channel 4 will run it by morning," someone said. "Better get your good tie ready for interviews," someone else joked. Dawes grinned. "As long as they spell my name right." Renner laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something about that still nagged at him. Her face, her silence, the way she didn't push back. He excused himself early and wandered back to the intake system. Just one more search. He typed it again. Lauren Bramly. Same record. Then a thought struck him. He tried another terminal. This time, he ran the name against federal agencies. Access denied. He frowned. Tried again. Still blocked. He wasn't high enough clearance. Now his fingers started to sweat. He stood slowly, looked around. Nobody watching. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. No badge swipe needed there. A back-channel database app, one he wasn't supposed to have. He searched again. Nothing. Then, an old article. Bramly receives Justice Dep. Medal of Merit. Work with Federal Task Force cited. He clicked it. The link was dead. But the thumbnail showed her, younger, hair tied back, standing between two men in FBI windbreakers. His heart skipped. He backed out, closed the app, locked the phone. Outside the squad room, Dawes was still joking with the others, still playing the part. Renner stared through the window. He hadn't asked the right questions. They hadn't known who she really was. And now he couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. The video hit the internet less than 24 hours after Lauren Bramly was cuffed in front of 100 stunned students. It started with a shaky frame, someone's phone shaking in their grip, but within seconds it stabilized just enough to catch the full scene. Officer Dawes gripping her arm, shoving her forward as Renner hovered at her back, laughing under his breath. There were no threats, no sudden movements, no drugs on the table, just Lauren's words, quiet and dignified. "Keep recording. Don't stop." The clip spread fast. First through Eastwick University's student group chats, then on TikTok, then across Reddit threads titled "Professor Dragged Out Mid-Class, No Reason Given." By the time a small local journalist named Devin Cross caught wind of it, the story had already begun spiraling beyond anyone's control. Devin sat at his kitchen table, laptop open, cereal going soggy in the bowl beside him. He rewatched the clip for the third time, rewinding it, pausing it, freezing on Lauren's expression. No fear, no outrage, just command. He clicked over to her faculty profile. Guest lecturer, Federal Constitutional Law, J.D. from Georgetown. Lectured at multiple schools, no criminal record, no accusations, no whispers of misconduct. She was, by all accounts, the model academic, decorated, admired, professional. And yet there she was, slammed into a patrol car like a street hustler caught with a dime bag. Devin took a screenshot of the moment her wrists were yanked behind her. He added it to the article he'd started drafting an hour ago. Then he picked up the phone and dialed a number he'd only used twice before, one of his sources on the city's civil rights board. "Hello?" a woman answered, sounding half asleep. "It's Devin Cross." "Sorry to call this early," he said quickly. "You seen the video from Eastwick?" There was a pause, then a quiet, "Yeah." "What are you hearing?" "Not much, just that it's being handled internally, whatever that means. But people are talking. The way you should be. You think the department knew who she was?" The woman on the other end didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "If they did, they're in trouble. If they didn't, they're in worse." Back at Eastwick, students had begun gathering outside the administration building. It started with a few posters, hand-scrawled in marker, "We want answers," and then more bodies filled the campus lawn. By noon it was a full protest. Signs waved, chants broke out. Faculty stood silently at the edges, some filming, some not knowing what to do at all. Jamal Ellis stood near the front, hoodie up, phone in hand, fingers trembling slightly. He had been in Lauren's class when it happened, had watched her get yanked away mid-lecture like a criminal. He had recorded it. His video, his angle, was the one now flooding every platform. And he was scared, not because of backlash, but because he knew what he saw. She didn't resist. They never read her rights. And that baggie they found? He was standing 2 feet from her briefcase. Nothing had been there. Nothing was dropped, nothing was discovered. It just appeared. Like magic. Like corruption always does. His roommate nudged him. "They're setting up a microphone. You want to say something?" Jamal shook his head. "Not yet." Across town, inside the Eastboro Police Department, Dawes paced the hallway behind the bullpen. He hadn't seen Renner all morning. Not since last night when Renner left early saying something about needing to check on a thing. Dawes wasn't worried. Not exactly. But something was shifting, and he could feel it in his gut, the same way dogs sense storms before the clouds roll in. He passed the front desk, where the sergeant on duty was talking on the phone. Their eyes met briefly. The sergeant nodded once, but there was something tight in his jaw. Inside his office, Dawes locked the door and sat. The booking photo still sat in the center of his desk. Her eyes haunted him. Not because they were afraid, but because they weren't. He booted up the desktop and opened the internal chat system. No new messages. He clicked over to a secure folder marked Evidence. Bramly L. The chain of custody on the plastic bag was intact. Logged, time-stamped, witnessed. Still, something felt off. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling, trying to shake the knot in his chest. She should have folded by now. Lawyers begging, reporters spinning her story into an apology tour, but nothing. Silence. A knock on the door snapped him back. It was Renner. "You seen it?" he asked before Dawes could even speak. "Seen what?" Renner stepped in, shut the door, and held up his phone. The video was paused mid-same. Lauren's voice, clear as a bell. "You didn't check my ID." Dawes waved it off. "So? Every punk says that." Renner didn't move. "Her name's in a federal directory. I had to use a back door to even see it." Dawes sat up. "You what?" "She's not just some professor. She worked federal, DOJ task force, and their sealed stuff, like high level." Dawes stared at him. "How sealed?" "Like top floor sealed." They both fell silent. Dawes cursed under his breath. "You sure it's her?" "I double-checked." Dawes slammed a hand on the desk. "Damn it." Outside, the hallway echoed with the sound of footsteps, shouts. Then the main office phone began to ring. Once, twice, over and over. The buzz spread fast. Calls from news outlets, civil rights attorneys, Eastwick faculty demanding records. And somewhere in all of that noise, a request for an internal review slid across Graves' desk with an urgent red tag. Back at the university protest, Jamal finally stepped forward. He took the mic, pulled down his hood, and looked out at the sea of students and faculty. "My name's Jamal Ellis," he said. "I was in Professor Bramley's class when she was arrested." A hush fell. I recorded the whole thing. I uploaded it. Because I wanted people to see what actually happened. And I'm telling you now. "They lied." The crowd murmured. Someone said, "Say that again." "They lied," Jamal repeated. "They lied about what she had. They lied about how she acted. They didn't even tell us why they were taking her. They just grabbed her, like she wasn't a person." He swallowed. Hard. "And now they're hoping we'll move on." But we won't. Back in Devon's apartment, the story was already live. His headline sat bold and unmissable. Professor Lauren Bramly arrested mid-lecture. Video raises questions about police conduct. Underneath, a still of her face from the moment she was cuffed. Eyes calm, spine straight, dignity untouched. Devon leaned back and refreshed the page. Share? 10. 50. Hundreds. By nightfall, national outlets would start calling. And somewhere deep in a government server, a flag would be raised over her name. Lauren Bramly wasn't just a case number anymore. She was the story. Lauren Bramly sat on the steel bench in the holding cell, her hands resting lightly on her lap, her back straight despite the thin mattress on the wall behind her. Her blazer had been taken, her earrings too. Her dress shirt was wrinkled now, her cuffs creased from being pushed against the concrete wall for hours. Still, she didn't look like someone who had been broken. She looked like someone who knew exactly how long to wait. The hum of the fluorescent lights above pulsed like a metronome, ticking time forward with cruel indifference. Across the bars, Officer Marquez leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, chewing on the cap of a dry pen. "Still not asking for a lawyer?" he asked, voice casual. Lauren glanced at him. "Not yet." "You know you're allowed to, right?" he added, mocking a tone of concern. "I mean, that's usually the first thing people do." She offered a small smile. "Let them keep talking first. People reveal more when they think they've already won." Marquez frowned slightly, uncertain whether he was being mocked or warned. He tapped the pen twice against the desk, eyes flicking to the small screen that monitored the cell. "You've got an odd way of playing this," he muttered. "I'm not playing," Lauren replied, gaze returning to the floor. "They are." He studied her, chewing again on the pen cap, then stood, grabbed his clipboard, and disappeared down the hallway without another word. She closed her eyes. Inhale, exhale. Behind the silence, her mind was cataloging everything. The name tags, the badge numbers, the layout of the precinct, the voices she'd heard during booking, the names whispered in conversation. Every inch of this place was being etched into memory like chalk on slate. She had done this before, on the other side of the glass. Back then, they called her by her title, Director Bramly, Special Agent Bramly, Ma'am. Now, they didn't call her anything at all. Just another black woman in a cell, assumed guilty before the paperwork even cleared. And that was fine. Let them underestimate her. Let them believe she had no power here. Down the hall, Officer Renner leaned against a vending machine, speaking in hushed tones to Sergeant Graves. His voice trembled beneath the surface, disguised by sarcasm and mock bravado. "I'm telling you, we need to get ahead of this. She's not just some guest speaker, man." Graves scowled. "So you're saying you screwed up?" "I'm saying we might have grabbed the wrong person." "You planted the evidence?" Renner hesitated, his mouth opened, then shut. Graves nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's what I thought." "It was Dawes. He had the bag ready before we even entered the room. Said it would be easy. Said she'd fold." Graves rubbed his temples. "You both better pray she does, because if she..." He didn't finish the sentence. Back in the cell, the silence was interrupted by the sound of approaching boots. The door buzzed and opened. Ald stepped in. Lauren didn't move. He leaned against the bars, arms folded, eyes cold and tight. "You comfortable?" he asked. "I've stayed in worse," she replied. "You know," he said, voice quiet now. "You keep acting like you know something I don't. That kind of confidence doesn't work in here. Not when your fingerprints are on a sealed bag of cocaine." "My fingerprints weren't on anything," she said calmly. "You're a law professor, right?" He smirked. "Then you know how this works. You get one shot to make your case. If you play it wrong, your career's over. Your reputation's already halfway there." He paused, looking for a crack in her. But there wasn't one. She didn't bite. "You don't want to rot in here," he added. "I won't," she said, eyes narrowing just a fraction. "But you might." It landed. Dawes stepped back, blinking once. Then he turned on his heel and left. She heard him curse under his breath in the hallway. Lauren tilted her head toward the camera in the ceiling corner, her eyes locked on the lens. She didn't speak, didn't smile, just stared, letting whoever was watching know, "I see you too." Later that evening, the door buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a cop. It was a woman in a gray suit with a small federal badge clipped to her lapel. Lauren stood. "Tasha Bellamy," the woman introduced herself. "Assistant District Attorney. I asked to see you privately." Marquez looked confused, but unlocked the door anyway. Bellamy stepped inside. She didn't sit. Lauren raised an eyebrow. They finally figured out who I am? Bellamy folded her arms. No, but I did. Lauren nodded. How long did it take? Longer than it should have, Bellamy admitted. The system's been scrubbed. Of course it has. I cross-referenced old DOJ directories, traced the last public appearances you made under your full title, then found a sealed court order listing your name as an investigative lead. East Coast Division, FBI Director. That you? Lauren didn't answer directly. Bellamy didn't need her to. They're hiding you, Bellamy added. Or trying to. Lauren looked toward the wall, then back. Why are you here, Tasha? I don't like what I'm seeing. This doesn't feel like a standard arrest. Too much red tape. Too many missing pieces. And the officers, they're acting like they got something to prove. They do, Lauren said. They think they're untouchable. Bellamy shifted her weight. Are you building something? Lauren didn't answer. You don't trust me, Bellamy said flatly. I don't trust anyone in this building. Not yet. Bellamy glanced around. You're not safe here. Lauren smiled, the first real smile in hours. That's the point. Bellamy studied her, then leaned in slightly. You don't need me to get you out, do you? I need you to let this play. For how long? Lauren's voice dropped. Until they think they've won. Bellamy exhaled. You've got guts. I'll give you that. I've got a plan, Lauren corrected. They have no idea what's coming. Bellamy nodded once, then turned to leave. Mrs. Bellamy, Lauren said just before the door closed. Bellamy paused. Next time you visit, Lauren added, bring the name list. Bellamy looked at her, brow raised. The ones they are protecting. I need to see it. Without another word, she left, and Lauren sat back down. The storm was only beginning, but she had waited long enough. Tasha Bellamy sat alone in her office, with the door locked, the blinds drawn, and 2 different search engines open on her laptop, each routed through a VPN she didn't entirely trust, but used anyway. She didn't take risks often. That wasn't her style. Tasha played by the rules, colored inside the lines, kept her head down. She made her name by winning cases, not chasing ghosts. But everything about Lauren Bramly's arrest tugged at something deep in her gut, a kind of quiet alarm she hadn't heard in years. She scrolled through a grainy PDF, an archived task force document with half the names blacked out, and there it was again. L. Bramly, listed under Federal Oversight Strategic Lead. No agency logos, no titles, just a line of text, like a shadow hidden in the static. Someone had gone out of their way to erase her, but they hadn't finished the job. Tasha opened a second window and began composing a message. Encrypted, routed through her DOJ proxy, she addressed it to a contact she hadn't reached out to in over 5 years. Lena Foster, a name she only remembered from one meeting, one conference, long ago, when they'd both stood in the same circle of women who didn't need to shout to command a room. Subject, immediate inquiry, confidential. Body, I need to verify a name. I believe one of your people is being held under fabricated charges. The situation is unstable. If she is who I believe she is, you're going to want to act fast. Her name is Lauren Bramly. She hovered over the send button, then hit it before she could think too hard. Across town, the buzz around the precinct had shifted from cocky to cautious. Phones still rang, but now the tones were tighter, the words clipped. Every new voicemail sounded like someone pulling a thread they weren't supposed to find. Renner sat at his desk, staring at the old thumbnail of Lauren from that DOJ article. It had been pulled offline less than an hour after he found it, but he had screenshotted it, her standing between 2 federal agents, smiling faintly, a medal pinned to her blazer. The caption was barely readable now, pixelated beyond repair. He tapped the edge of his phone against his desk. Dawes hadn't said much since Graves pulled them both into a closed-door meeting that morning. Just a few grunts, a few lines about keeping our stories tight and sticking to the report. But Renner could feel it in the air. Dawes was sweating. He'd been talking louder, laughing harder, posturing. A man tightening the armor around a secret. "Hey," Renner called softly to the officer beside him. "What's the chatter on Bramly? Anyone coming to get her?" The woman shrugged. "She's just sitting there. No lawyer, no movement. Weird, right?" Renner nodded and tried to keep his face from showing anything. Graves walked by moments later. Didn't look at either of them. Just murmured, "Be in the conference room in 15. When the door closed again, Renner stood and slipped away to the locker room. He needed air. On the campus of Eastwick University, the protest had grown into a daily ritual. Students gathered in the main quad every afternoon, holding signs, passing flyers, chanting into megaphones. Faculty now stood alongside them, some in suits, some in hoodies, all with eyes drawn toward the administration building, where no one from the university had yet made a formal statement. Jamal Ellis stood at the center again, hoodie pulled low over his eyes. The camera crews had started coming 2 days ago. Local news at first, then national reporters, setting up lights and mics. He tried not to flinch every time someone asked him for another interview. He hadn't wanted to be the face of this. He just wanted people to know the truth. The original video, his video, had now passed 4 million views. And every time he watched it, he saw more. Not just the brutality, not just the arrogance. He saw Lauren's eyes. How she knew. How she wasn't surprised. He scrolled through his messages and stopped on one from a contact named Cross. Devin Cross, independent reporter. They'd spoken twice now. Cross had asked questions no one else had, about Lauren's demeanor, about the way the officers talked to her, about the fact that she never once claimed innocence. She never needed to. He opened the message. "Cross, you said she told someone to keep recording. That was you, right?" Jamal typed back. "Jamal." "Yeah. Me." Cross. "You still have the raw file?" Jamal. "Yeah, why?" Cross. "Send it. There might be more in the background than we realized." Back in the precinct, Lauren heard the faint echo of raised voices down the hallway. Arguments behind closed doors, frustrated pacing, the rhythm of control starting to fray. The silence around her had changed. Earlier there had been whispers, sneers, a steady drip of mockery from passing guards. But now, just footsteps. Quick, nervous, and distant. The cell buzzed open. Officer Marquez appeared again, eyes darker now, jaw tight. "Your visitor," he said, flatly. Lauren stood. Bellamy entered, this time with a folder under one arm and a phone pressed tightly in her hand. She didn't sit. "There's movement," she said immediately. Lauren didn't ask for details. "A contact of yours reached out," Bellamy continued. "Federal oversight. They didn't say who, but their message was clear. Hold your ground. They're coming." Lauren nodded slowly. "How long?" "No to yet. But they know." Bellamy opened the folder. "These are internal logs. I pulled everything I could under my badge before someone tried to lock me out. This isn't just 2 dirty cops. There are at least 6 other sealed arrests under Officer Dawes' record, flagged for evidence inconsistencies. None of them were investigated." Lauren flipped through the files. Dates, names, same charges, same patterns. "They use the same script," she said. Bellamy nodded. "Over and over." Lauren closed the folder and handed it back. "It won't be enough," she said. "We need public pressure, more than just a protest." "I've got a journalist circling," Bellamy said. "And your student, Jamal Ellis. He's rallying people in ways the media can't ignore." Lauren finally allowed herself a breath. Bellamy watched her carefully. "You sure you want to keep sitting in here?" Lauren looked up. "I've waited longer in worse places for smaller truths," she said. "I'll stay." Bellamy turned to leave. As she reached the door, Lauren added, "When they come, tell them to use the east entrance, less exposure, fewer cameras." Bellamy paused, smiled faintly. "You're still running the op, aren't you?" Lauren didn't answer. She didn't need to. Behind the bars, she wasn't trapped. She was building the case, brick by brick. And she knew, soon, everything would collapse on the men who thought she was just another woman they could bury. The hallway outside courtroom 2B smelled like bleach and cheap coffee. It always did. Like they were trying too hard to scrub away what justice couldn't. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, flickering slightly, like the building itself was nervous. Outside the double doors a small crowd had gathered, their voices low, eyes restless. Some held phones, ready to film. Some wore badges, others held notepads. Everyone in their own way had come to see a spectacle. At the end of the corridor, 2 officers led Lauren Bramly forward in cuffs. She wore the same clothes from the day she was arrested, though someone had let her brush her hair and straighten the collar of her shirt. Her wrists were bound, but she walked like someone who'd never been chained. Inside the courtroom, Officer Dawes sat with his elbows on the table, flanked by Renner and their attorney, Damon Keller. Keller was a smug, sharp-jawed man in a tailored gray suit and a crooked smile that always said too much before he spoke. He leaned toward Dawes, whispering something, and they both chuckled like this was some private joke they were waiting to reveal. Across the aisle, Assistant District Attorney Tasha Bellamy adjusted her files, one hand tapping a pen rhythmically against her notebook. She hadn't said much that morning. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes never strayed far from the courtroom doors. The judge entered, a tall woman with silver hair and a no-nonsense scowl, Honorable Helena Whitman, known for delivering sharp words and cold verdicts. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Everyone stood. Lauren stepped forward, hands still cuffed. Whitman glanced down from the bench. "Defendant may be seated. Let's begin." Lauren sat, no lawyer beside her. Judge Whitman peered over her glasses. "Miss Bramly, are you currently without legal representation?" Lauren lifted her chin. "I'm representing myself." A murmur swept through the room. Keller smirked. The judge raised an eyebrow. "You understand what that entails?" "I do. And you are competent and capable of defending yourself?" Keller leaned back in his chair, clearly amused. "She's a professor, Your Honor. Probably thinks she can out-argue everyone in here." Whitman didn't look at him. "This isn't a classroom, Mr. Keller, and I don't need your commentary." The smirk dropped. Bellamy's eyes flicked to Lauren, searching for the angle. Judge Whitman continued. "Then let's proceed. Charges have been brought against Ms. Bramly for possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, as submitted by arresting officers Trent Dawes and Mike Renner. Preliminary hearing is now in session." Keller stood. "Your Honor, the evidence is straightforward. My clients received a call about suspicious behavior on a college campus. Upon arrival, they found Ms. Bramly in possession of a clear bag of cocaine discovered in her briefcase. She was uncooperative, evasive, and refused to provide identification until after being transported. The arrest followed standard procedure." He turned to the room like he was on stage. "This is a simple matter of law. Illegal possession, public setting, nothing more." Whitman turned to Lauren. "Ms. Bramly, your response?" Lauren stood slowly, her movements deliberate, unbothered. "Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence a statement," she said calmly, along with a video file submitted by a student who recorded my arrest. "It contradicts the officer's report." She handed a flash drive to the bailiff, who brought it to the bench. Whitman inserted it into the computer beside her and clicked play. The room went still. The footage began to roll. From the back of the lecture hall, the camera showed Lauren mid-sentence at the podium, speaking clearly to her students. Then Dawes and Renner entered without announcing themselves. No verbal explanation, no call for identification. Dawes walked straight to Lauren and grabbed her arm. Renner followed, pulling cuffs from his belt. Then came the moment. On screen, Dawes reached into his own vest pocket, pulled out the plastic bag, and held it up while facing the camera. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, a ripple of unease. Keller rose to object, but Whitman raised her hand. Quiet. She watched the rest of the clip. Lauren never touched the bag, never resisted, never spoke out of turn. When the video ended, Whitman turned to Dawes and Renner. Would either officer like to amend their sworn report before we continue? Neither answered. Keller cleared his throat. Your Honor, videos can be manipulated. That's enough, Whitman snapped. She turned to Lauren. Where did this video come from? A student who was present, Jamal Ellis. He posted it publicly. Ada Bellamy has verified the original file and its source. Bellamy nodded once. Judge Whitman exhaled slowly. This is not a preliminary hearing anymore. This is an unfolding investigation. She looked at the officers. You submitted false evidence to this court. If proven, you could face criminal charges of your own. Dawes shifted in his seat. For the first time, he looked small. Lauren didn't sit. She kept her hands on the table in front of her. I would also like to submit a motion to dismiss the charges, she said, on the grounds of malicious prosecution, abuse of power, and unlawful arrest. Keller stood again. This is grandstanding. Whitman glared at him. You're dangerously close to being held in contempt, Mr. Keller. Keller sat. Motion is received, Whitman continued. Ruling is deferred pending internal review. Bail is waived. Ms. Bramly, you are free to leave this courtroom. The cuffs were removed. Lauren flexed her fingers for the first time. She picked up her folder, gave a quiet nod to Bellamy, and stepped down from the defense table. Keller whispered furiously to Dawes and Renner as they sat frozen, disbelief in their eyes. Lauren didn't look at them. As she walked past the gallery, reporters scrambled to snap pictures, some calling her name, others shouting questions. She didn't answer any of them. Outside the courthouse, the wind had picked up. Protesters stood across the street behind barricades, cheering as soon as they saw her. She paused at the top of the steps. Devon Cross stood near the bottom with a recorder in hand, eyes wide. Miss Bramly, are you planning to make a statement? She turned to him, gave a slow smile, and said, Not yet. And then she walked away, leaving the crowd and cameras behind. Inside the courthouse, Dawes wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Renner stared at the floor, jaw clenched tight. Keller packed up his briefcase without saying a word. In the back corner, Tasha Bellamy sat still for a long moment, before finally standing and slipping the flash drive into her coat pocket. The first wall had cracked, and now the building was starting to sway. The next morning, Lauren Bramly walked through the glass doors of the downtown courthouse unescorted. No handcuffs, no whispers from bailiffs, no eyes tracking her like prey. She wore a fitted navy suit and low heels that clicked softly with each step, her posture tall, her pace deliberate. To anyone watching, she looked like a lawyer returning to court, not the defendant who'd shaken it the day before. But inside courtroom 3C, the air had shifted. It wasn't just the media frenzy outside or the viral video that refused to leave the national trending page. It was something older than that, deeper. The sound of reputations unraveling in real time. Dawes was already seated at the defense table, pale under the sharp white lights. Renner sat beside him, quieter than usual, the cocky tilt in his mouth gone. Their attorney, Keller, fumbled with his briefcase, his hands unsteady. He'd lost control of the story, and he knew it. EDA Bellamy sat across from them, a thick stack of files in front of her, neatly bound and color-coded. She didn't look smug. She didn't need to. Her silence was heavier than any accusation. Judge Whitman took the bench at exactly 9:00 a.m. "This is a continuation of yesterday's hearing," she began, her voice crisp. "After reviewing the footage submitted by the defense as well as preliminary findings from the district attorney's internal review, I have additional questions regarding the identity of Miss Bramly and her professional background. Ms. Bramly, please step forward." Lauren rose and moved to the center of the courtroom. The gallery behind her was filled now. Press, students, legal observers. Jamala Ellis sat near the back with his hood down and a notepad in his lap, scribbling quietly. Whitman leaned forward slightly. "You stated yesterday that you were representing yourself." "I am," Lauren replied, "and that you are qualified to do so." "I am." "Then I'm asking, on the record, what is your current employment and title?" The room seemed to inhale. Lauren didn't rush. She looked directly at the judge and said, "My name is Lauren Camille Bramly. I'm a law professor, yes, but I also serve as the current director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Eastern Division. I oversee multiple cross-jurisdictional task forces, including operations in civil rights violations and law enforcement corruption." The courtroom fell dead silence. Keller blinked. Renner's jaw went slack. Dawes stopped breathing for a full 2 seconds. Judge Whitman took a long pause. "You're telling me you are a sitting FBI director?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Why was this not disclosed earlier?" "Because I was investigating ongoing corruption within the Eastboro Police Department. My position was deliberately withheld under an executive-level seal while the case developed." Bellamy rose, her voice firm. "Your Honor, I can confirm her credentials. I received a direct call from Deputy Director Lena Foster of the FBI last night. Ms. Bramley's status has now been made available to the Department of Justice, and her sealed files have been authenticated." The judge looked between them, her face unreadable. Then she nodded slowly. "So this wasn't just an unlawful arrest. This was a federal sting." Lauren didn't answer. She didn't need to. Whitman looked toward the officers. "Officers Dawes and Renner, you submitted false evidence and violated the rights of a federal officer during the course of an active investigation. Do you wish to make a statement?" Neither moved. "Very well," Whitman continued. "Per protocol, this court is notifying the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility and the Department of Justice. All evidence will be sealed pending federal review, and both officers are temporarily suspended from duty until further notice." Keller stood up, red in the face. "Your Honor, I was unaware of my client's actions." Whitman cut him off. "Save it for the disciplinary board, Mr. Keller. You represented a lie. Whether you knew or not, that's no longer this court's concern." Lauren turned and began walking back to her seat, but Whitman's voice stopped her. "Ms. Bramly," she said, "for what it's worth, this court regrets what happened to you. I hope, for the city's sake, you bring everything hidden into the light." Lauren gave a polite nod. "That's the plan." After the hearing adjourned, the courthouse halls became a storm of microphones and flashing lights. Lauren didn't stop for any of them. Devin Cross pushed through the cluster of reporters, but before he could reach her, Bellamy appeared at her side. "They want a press conference," Bellamy said. "I'm not ready to speak publicly," Lauren replied. "Not yet. You will be soon." As they stepped outside, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped Lena Foster, tall, sharp, with a stare that could slice through concrete. "Director Bramly?" she greeted. Lauren smiled. "Deputy Director. Nice work." They took the bait. Lena opened the door for her. "Let's talk inside." As the SUV pulled away, Dawes watched from the building across the street. His tie was crooked, and his hand clutched a file folder like it might save him. Inside was a list. Every name he thought would protect him. But he could feel them slipping away, too. Renner was already making calls, whispers, bargains. And Lauren Bramly was just getting started. The SUV's windows were tinted so dark, the world outside looked like it was underwater. Inside, the air was still and cold. The hum of the city beyond barely reached through the sealed frame. Lauren Bramly sat on the leather seat beside Lena Foster, the thick folder resting unopened between them. She hadn't touched it yet. She already knew what it contained. Margaret Bramly continued. "They started cleaning house the moment your name dropped," Lena said, watching her. "Calls went out, phones got shut off, a few people left the city overnight. Someone from internal ops says the mayor's office even requested a private meeting with the city's oversight board." Lauren kept her eyes forward. "Of course they did. You know what you're about to walk into, right?" "Yes," she said. "But I'm not walking in alone." Lena gave a faint nod. She pulled a tablet from her coat and opened a secure document. Lines of redacted names scrolled across the screen, replaced slowly with restored identifiers as new clearance codes decrypted the file in real time. "Most of these people were just names on paper when you went under," Lena said. "Since then, 2 of them have been promoted. 3 were moved out of Eastboro PD and into state roles. 1 is now in the private security sector. Big contracts, political reach." Lauren finally reached for the tablet. She scrolled slowly, line by line, name by name. Some she remembered from old hearings, others from briefings she had once led before they turned quiet behind her back. One name stopped her. "Darnell Cray," she read aloud. Lena nodded. "He's the one that concerns us the most. Former IA, now head of private policing in Northway County. Has friends in federal supply chains and a nasty habit of laundering his movements through retired officers." Lauren exhaled. "He was at my first hearing, sat in the gallery. I remember thinking, he's not here for justice. He was tracking the fallout. And now he's on the edge of being untouchable," Lena replied, "unless we make the whole thing public." Lauren tapped the screen. "We will, but I need to go to the department first, face to face." Lena frowned. "That's not protocol." "It's personal," Lauren said. "They wanted me silenced in a cage. They don't get to hide behind desks now." The SUV slowed as it reached the edge of the Eastboro Police Department. The press hadn't reached this side of the building yet. No crowds, no cameras, just low gray walls, tired concrete steps, and a quiet that felt ready to explode. As the car pulled to a stop, Lena reached into her jacket and handed Lauren her old badge, clean, weighted, engraved with her title. "You're not undercover anymore." Lauren looked down at it. The shield gleamed even in the dim light. "No," she said. "Now I'm in the open." She stepped out. Inside the station, Sergeant Graves was mid-conversation with an internal affairs officer when the door swung open and every voice in the room died. Lauren stepped inside like she had never left. Eyes forward, steps even, not one badge dared look away. She walked straight to the front desk and laid her badge on the counter. "I'm here to speak with Officer Dawes and Officer Renner," she said clearly. "This isn't a request." Graves moved from behind the desk slowly, like someone waking from a nightmare they didn't realize was real. "Director Bramly," he said, forcing the words through a dry throat. "You were copied on the arrest report," Lauren said. "You logged the evidence, you saw the footage, yet you said nothing." Graves looked down. "I didn't know who you were," was the point. A door opened down the hallway. Dawes stood there, face pale, lips pressed into a tight line. He didn't walk forward. He just watched her, eyes darting. like a man seeing a ghost come back to finish something. "Officer Dawes," Lauren called out, "we have unfinished business." He flinched. The IA officer beside him turned. "Director, if you'd like to continue this in private." "No," she said. "Let them hear it." Dawes slowly stepped closer. "You planted evidence," she said. "You falsified your report. You lied under oath. And you did it because you assumed I wouldn't fight back, that no one would believe me." Renner appeared behind him, hovering at the edge of the hallway. He looked smaller now, not physically, but in presence, like whatever fire had fueled his ego had burned out. "You both played a game with real lives," Lauren continued. "You've done it before. You thought this one would be easy. But the cameras were rolling, the files were saved, and the walls you thought would protect you, they're coming down." Dawes looked around the station. Nobody met his eyes. Not the front desk officer, not the admin near the copier, not even Graves. Lauren pulled a copy of the decrypted list from her bag and laid it on the counter. "These are the names of every officer tied to unlawful arrests, fake evidence logs, coerced statements, and internal suppression over the last 5 years. Each one has a file. Each one is being sent to federal review, starting now." A beat passed. "You're bluffing," Dawes said, voice cracking slightly. Lauren smiled. "Try me." Just then, Lena stepped into the station, flanked by 2 agents in full tactical gear. One carried a hard case, the other a laptop. "The review begins today," Lena announced. One of the officers by the bullpen dropped their pen. Lauren turned back to Dawes. "You thought your badge gave you power, but power without purpose is just a weapon." Renner tried to speak. "I didn't know. Dawes told me she was just a professor. I didn't know who she was." "But you knew what you were doing," Lauren said, not even looking at him. "And you did it anyway." He shrank into the wall behind him. Graves stepped forward, mouth open like he might object, then saw Lena's badge and stopped cold. The station became a hive of whispers, murmurs crawling across the room like static. Everyone felt it now. The shift. The collapse of an old game. Lauren picked up her badge, clipped it to her lapel, and said simply, "I'll be back tomorrow. Have your desks cleared." And then she turned, walked past Dawes, past Renner, past Graves. Not another word. Outside, the sun had started to rise behind the glass buildings downtown. The air smelled like smoke and morning coffee. Lena caught up to her on the sidewalk. "That was a little dramatic," she said. Lauren smiled faintly. "Good. You know this won't be over quick." "I'm counting on it," Lauren replied. They climbed back into the SUV. Behind them, inside the precinct, someone slammed a locker door. A phone buzzed, unanswered. An officer picked up the list from the desk, their fingers trembling. Change had walked in, named every ghost, and didn't care who watched. And Lauren Bramly had only just begun. The knock came late. It was nearly midnight when Devin Cross heard it. 3 short raps against his apartment door. He sat frozen for a second, heart thudding in his ears. He hadn't ordered anything, wasn't expecting anyone. The story on his screen glared back at him, still unfinished, still explosive. A half-done headline blinked at the top. FBI Director once silenced, now leads takedown of Eastboro PD. He rose quietly, careful not to kick over the coffee cup under his desk, and approached the door. Through the peephole, a woman. Sharp suit. Confident stance. No smile. It was her, Lauren Bramly. He opened the door slowly. "Director," he said, a little breathless. "I'm not here officially," she replied. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside without thinking. She entered like someone who'd done this before. Not the home-invading kind of entry, but the kind that made a place feel like it belonged to her the moment she crossed the threshold. Her eyes swept the room once, taking in the notes on his corkboard, the web of string connecting names and timelines. "You've been busy," she said. I was just trying to map the fallout, he replied. I've got at least 4 officers tied to previous false arrests. 2 of them were under Dawes's command. None of them ever reached trial, all dismissed. Sealed settlements. Lauren nodded, unsurprised. They knew what they were doing, she said, and they counted on no one connecting the dots. He hesitated. You could have gone to a major outlet. CNN, The Times. Why me? She turned, folding her arms lightly across her chest. Because the majors take their time. They get watered down. They negotiate headlines. You don't. I could still screw it up. Then don't. He nodded slowly. She walked over to his desk and tapped a folder with her finger. You have the unredacted files. Some of them. Ada Bellamy gave me access to a few reports. And a few... I found myself... She looked impressed. You cross-checkered with federal archives? Choice. Lauren gave a rare smile. You'd make a good analyst. I'd rather stay independent. Think smart. She stepped back. I need you to publish everything by tomorrow. He blinked. Everything? Yes, not just what they did to me, what they did to everyone else, the students, the families, the names they ruined to protect their numbers. He hesitated. You realize what happens when that goes live? I do. There are people on this list who aren't just cops anymore, he warned. There's a judge in there, a city councilman, a private security firm that handles 3 state prisons. One of them is rumored to have contracts with federal immigration. I'm aware. If I do this, I lose sources. I probably lose access to the department forever. You'll gain credibility, she said, and you'll help break something that's long overdue. Devon sat down slowly. He didn't look at her when he said, What if I get hurt? She knelt beside him, her voice calm and even. Then I make it the last thing they ever do. He looked up. Something in her tone wasn't just a promise. It was a threat. Quiet, legal, absolute. She handed him a sealed envelope. This goes to the DOJ if anything happens to me before the week ends. He took it carefully. It's not just about me, she added. They tried to bury more than my name. They buried evidence, bodies, people who don't get second chances. I can't speak for all of them, but I can speak loud enough to make them heard. He looked down at the envelope, then back at his screen, and he knew the story couldn't wait anymore. Across town, Dawes sat in the back booth of a dive bar he used to frequent during his academy years. The place smelled like stale beer and fried grease, and the TV in the corner played a late-night rerun of an old crime drama. He hadn't touched his drink. His phone buzzed for the 4th time in 20 minutes. He ignored it again. Across the table sat a man in a clean gray polo, quiet and calculated. Darnell Cray. You made a mess, Cray said. Dawes bristled. I didn't know who she was. You should have known. Or at least had the instinct to back off when it got weird. She was smug. Dawes growled. She made it personal. It was personal the moment she walked into that courtroom without blinking. Cray leaned forward. Do you know what happens when people like her get the spotlight? People like me disappear. Our networks get exposed. Our clients lose trust. And suddenly, old files that should stay buried start floating back to the surface. Dawes said nothing. Cray took a long breath. The cleanup has already started. But your name's too public now. Too loud. So what? You cutting me loose? Cray didn't answer. He didn't have to. Dawes shoved his drink away, hand trembling. She ruined everything. No, Cray said. You did. You thought this was about control. She knew it was about leverage. Dawes stood up, angry, desperate. What if I take her down with me? Cray looked at him flatly. Then you'd better hope she doesn't get back up. He left without finishing his drink. Dawes sat alone again. The bar felt darker now. At dawn, the article went live. They thought she was powerless. She turned out to be the FBI director. Evan included everything: the names, the files, the video stills, the sealed settlements, the falsified records, the testimonies from former students and public defenders. It exploded within minutes. Cable news hosts scrambled to summarize it. Social media flooded with hashtags. Justice for Lauren trended within the hour. By mid-morning, 3 officers resigned. By noon, 2 city officials had called emergency press conferences. And by nightfall, the governor's office issued a statement calling for a full investigation into allegations of systemic misconduct. Lauren sat in a private room above a parking garage, her phone buzzing non-stop with messages she didn't read. She sipped her tea, watched the sunrise, and said nothing. Because sometimes the loudest thing in the world is a woman who waited, and then answered back all at once. The radio buzzed in Graves' office before the knock even came. Static at first, then a short burst of garbled code, a signal only a few people in the building would recognize. Not a police call, not a dispatch frequency, a federal flag. Graves stood quickly, slid the drawer open under his desk, and grabbed a thumb-sized recorder. He yanked the cord out of the wall and cursed under his breath. He'd already heard the rumors, resignations, sealed warrants, agents arriving unannounced. But hearing the coded alert, that meant this wasn't over. It meant it was escalating. The knock came again, 3 sharp taps. He opened the door to find Lena Foster standing there, 2 agents behind her. One held a hard case, the other had a clipboard. "Sergeant Graves," Lena said evenly, "we're executing a federal subpoena. Step aside." Graves did. Barely. In less than a minute they were in his office, prying open cabinets, pulling down file boxes. The clipboard agent handed him the paperwork, and Lena didn't look back as she said, "Your internal communications are also subject to review. We'll need access to your laptop." Graves stiffened. "This is overreach." "This is protocol," she replied. "Consider yourself lucky. You're being notified. That's more than most got this week." Down the hall, the bullpen had gone silent. Officers stood frozen at their desks, watching the agents move room to room. More feds entered the building from the rear. Men and women with no names on their jackets, just the gold letters that spelled out FBI in bold, unmistakable language. The kind of letters that didn't ask permission. Lauren arrived minutes later. She wore no coat, no blazer, just a fitted black turtleneck and slacks, her badge clipped plainly at her side. Her presence filled the air like smoke. Officers turned when she walked past. Some nodded, others looked down. Dawes was already in the interview room, cuffed, silent, staring at the wall. Ranners sat across the hall, pale and twitching, knees bouncing like a man about to confess everything to save his skin. Lauren didn't speak to either. She moved through the department like a surgeon walking into an open theater, knowing exactly where to cut. In a conference room converted into a temporary command center, Agent Lena set up the wire. It was an old trick. Record a conversation, capture the rot from the inside. But this time, the bait wasn't just any officer. It was a city contractor, a man who'd built his business selling peacekeeping services to the state, laundering surveillance contracts through 3 shell firms. His name was Malik Rohn, and he was protected, at least until now. Lauren stood in front of the agents as they prepped the listening gear. "Won't come if he sees you," Lena said. "He'll come," Lauren replied. "He owes Dawes, and Dawes owes me." They wired the room. Lauren sat in the chair across from the microphone and waited. Outside, the precinct operated under a dull, metallic tension. Nobody knew who was clean. Nobody knew who would be called next. 30 minutes passed. Then the side door buzzed. Malik Rohn entered wearing a navy trench coat and a calm expression that didn't match the tightness around his jaw. He didn't look like a man caught in anything. He looked like a man who expected negotiation. Until he saw Lauren. He stopped short. "You," he said. "Me," Lauren replied. "Sit." He hesitated, then sat. "You're not with the local boys anymore," Roan said. "I never was. See, this is federal now? It's been federal since the day Dawes put his hands on me." Roan nodded slowly. "And what do you want?" "The names," she said. "The contractors, the shell firms, the payouts." He chuckled softly. "You think I'm just going to give you that?" "No," Lauren said. "I think you will when I show you what's on this drive." She slid a USB across the table. Roan looked at it, but didn't touch it. "What is it?" "Wire transfers," she said. "Invoices, audio logs. A 10-minute recording from a conversation you had with Chief Granger last November, talking about camera feeds from a protest that mysteriously disappeared." His face didn't change, but his hands twitched. "Do you know the difference between what I have and what the media has?" she asked. He didn't answer. "I don't need to convince anyone you're guilty. I just need to bury you in the same grave you helped them dig for my students. My name alone, now, carries more weight than any spin your lawyers can create." Roan leaned back. "So what? You gonna throw me to the wolves?" "No," she said quietly. "You're going to lead us to them. You want your sentence cut, you give me everything." He stared at her. Then, after a long silence, nodded once. Outside the room, Lena gave the signal. The feed was clean. The wire had worked. Roan had taken the bait. By sundown, a second list was printed. 10 new names. 3 elected officials, 4 contractors, 2 former officers, and 1 federal liaison who had signed off on all of it. While working on several of each list, Dick wrote a comment. Lauren stared at the paper for a long time. "They're not just dirty," she said. "They're organized." "Yeah," Lena replied. "Like a corporation?" "No," Lauren said. "Like a cartel." That night, in a room above the city's federal building, Lauren stood at a podium for the first time since her identity had been made public. No cameras were allowed inside. No press. Only staff. Agents. Witnesses. Jamal Ellis sat in the front row, his fingers clutching a worn notebook. Devin Cross stood near the back, his recorder in his pocket, his eyes locked on her. Lauren scanned the room. "Justice," she began, "doesn't happen in a courtroom. Not really. It doesn't live in statutes or sealed settlements. It lives in the moments when people refuse to stay silent." She paused. "I was arrested because someone believed they could write a false narrative and no one would question it. But that's not what happened. A student recorded it, a journalist published it, a prosecutor followed it, and now we're here." She looked to Jamal. "To the people who think their voices don't matter, I'm standing because yours did." The room didn't clap. They didn't need to. It wasn't a speech for applause. It was a line in the sand. When she stepped down from the podium, Lena whispered, "That was bold." Lauren replied, "It was true." Outside, the wind had picked up, and in offices across the city, old men with old power felt something they hadn't in years. Fear. The courtroom was packed, not with reporters, not with gawkers, but with people. Real people. The kind who never made it into the news unless something terrible happened to them. Students. Single moms. Teachers. Retired postal workers. Formerly incarcerated men in clean button-downs who'd once been swallowed by this very system and somehow climbed their way back out. They came for one reason, because someone stood up and didn't flinch. Lauren Bramly sat in the front row, her badge clipped to her hip, her hands folded in her lap. Not as a defendant, not as an investigator, just as herself, whole, present, seen. At the bench, the judge read the final sentencing orders. Dawes was done. 7 years. No parole. Renner got 4, cooperating testimony. Malik Rohn, 6 federal counts with 3 more pending. His business licenses revoked, his private contracts frozen, his network dismantled, one corrupt tentacle at a time. And the others, the councilman, the retired chief, the contractors with fake names and real blood on their money, they were still being processed, still tumbling down the staircase Lauren had pulled from under them. But today wasn't about the fall. It was about the landing. After the sentencing ended, the room buzzed with quiet energy, the kind that trembled through the floorboards, even though no one was cheering. No one had to. They just stood when Lauren did. Not like a standing ovation, not like an army, just like people acknowledging another human being who refused to bend. Jamal was waiting for her in the lobby afterward, clutching a small folder in one hand. I thought you should have this, he said, holding it out. She took it, opened the flap, and found a single printed photo inside, grainy from a lecture hall camera, her, in mid-gesture, pointing toward a projector. Young faces turned toward her, attentive, alive. She looked up. You kept this? He smiled. That was the first class you ever taught at Eastwick. I downloaded the footage before the school wiped it last week. Any more they wipe it? New leadership, trying to erase the past. She nodded. History doesn't erase that easy. No, Jamal said. But it's easier to face when people like you leave something behind. Lauren gave a soft smile and tucked the photo into her coat pocket. Out on the steps of the courthouse, Devin Cross stood waiting with his mic down, his camera operator already packing up. Didn't come to ask questions, he said. Just wanted to say thank you. Lauren nodded. You didn't just report the truth. You gave it oxygen. He chuckled. Still got death threats. You'll be all right, she said. They bark when they're scared. He stepped aside as she passed. There were no podiums this time, no press release, no grand exit. Just footsteps, quiet and steady down the stone stairs. Bellamy was waiting at the bottom. You ready for the next mess? She asked, arching a brow. Lauren gave her a look. What do you think? Bellamy handed her a flash drive. This one's from Northway County. New complaints, different names, same pattern. Lauren tucked it into her coat. The work never ends. No, Bellamy said, but the right people are finally doing it. They stood together for a moment in the wind. Then Lena Foster's black SUV pulled up to the curb again, just like it had the day they started turning the tide. She stepped out, motioned to the open door, and called, "One last ride, Director?" Lauren looked behind her. At the courthouse, at the crowd slowly thinning, at the quiet rumble of something changing under the surface of Eastboro. She turned back and stepped into the SUV. Inside, Lena slid a file across the seat. "What's this?" Lauren asked. "Your new office." Lauren opened the folder. Inside was a set of keys, a security badge, and a simple printed title card. Director of Special Investigations, Civil Oversight Division. Lauren blinked. This was supposed to go to Patterson. "Is he retired yesterday?" Lena said with a grin, citing irreconcilable shifts in the bureau. Lauren couldn't help but smile. "So now it's mine." It always was. The SUV pulled away from the curb, turning down the avenue that cut through the heart of the city. As they passed Eastboro Police Department, Lauren saw the old signage being taken down. The new one read, Office of Civil Accountability. To start, not everything, but something. A spark. They drove in silence for a while, the city slipping past outside the windows. Quieter than before, but not asleep, not dead, just different. Rebuilding. At a red light, Lena said, "You think this was worth it?" Lauren didn't answer right away. She watched a group of teenagers cross the street, laughing, holding protest signs like relics of the past. 2 weeks. Not angry, not broken, just aware. She looked back at Lena. "Every minute," she said. And for the first time in weeks, she leaned back against the seat, closed her eyes, and let the sun warm her face as the city moved forward. She wasn't hunted anymore. He wasn't hidden. She wasn't silenced. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. And this time, they would hear her coming,